Using a freelance writer for your law firm blog with Laura Briggs, episode 28. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Profit with Law. And today you are in for a treat. It is another bonus episode with a wonderful interview. Our guest today is Laura Briggs. Now, Laura Briggs and I go way back to 2016. I mean, it was only 3 years ago, but the way that things run today and everything is in warp zone when it comes to the way that we operate and everything that's going on around us. 3 years is feels like a long time, and the progression of business development and so on. So 3 years ago, I actually was speaking with a different audience and getting interviewed on podcasts, and Laura had her own podcast, and I was a guest on her show. And since then, I've had an opportunity to watch her journey, and she has she's a freelance writer, and she's coached other freelance writers on starting a freelance writing business. She has authored a book that is available on Amazon called Start Your Own Freelance Writing Business, The Complete Guide to Starting and Scaling from Scratch, and that's in conjunction with the Entrepreneur Magazine book publishing division. So she is quite the authority when it comes to freelance writing, but more importantly, she does freelance writing for law firms. And that's why I wanted to bring her on the show. I wanted to get her perspective and understand exactly how that works. So Laura is a legal SEO writer and copywriter. She works with law firms and digital marketing agencies on quality research and original content for websites. And one of the things that we as law firms have to grapple with is where to put our marketing dollars and where to put our marketing efforts. And one of the things that is super powerful in helping you with your search rankings, how you show up in Google when people are looking for your specific area of expertise, has to do with blog post articles that are on your website that have the right keywords, the right information, the right links to other places, backlinks, links from other places to your site. All of that is called SEO, search engine optimization, which affects how far up in the search your website shows. And some of the firms who have had really great success has been because of their efforts in SEO. However, many law firm owners have a lot of trepidation, hesitation to putting effort into SEO. And there's 2 reasons. One is because either you think that you need to write the stuff yourself, and therefore that seems overwhelming. It seems like something that's outside your comfort zone, something you're not good at. You might be really good at drafting, but you may not be really good at writing a blog post. And the second thing is that there's so many companies out there touting that they're going to help you with SEO. And they, it's just a frontline sales gimmick. The reality is that they don't do much as far as, helping your SEO rankings because they're not helping you put out quality content. They're just working on the underlying code and keywords and backlinks and things like that, which is a piece of it. But the primary thing that's going to help you show up in Google properly is to just have content that people want to read, that's engaging, that compels the audience that's doing the searching. So as people find your content relevant, Google moves you up in the rankings. So if somebody clicks on a link to your website because it came up in a search, and now they sit on your webpage and read the blog post, Google knows that they got there and spent 5 minutes on your website. Whereas if they got there and they just click back very quickly, then Google knows that it was not a good result that they were delivering. And that's how the algorithm really rates and figures out how to rate your stuff. So this is a real eye-opening episode because it opens up a whole nother frontier of possibility for you where you don't have to do the writing. You don't have to create these blog posts, and we dig deep into the process of how this works and how a non-attorney freelance writer is able to write blog posts for a law firm. Really, really interesting content, and I loved this interview. A little bit lengthy. You're gonna be stuck with me for an hour, but it is an hour that's well worth it. So plug those headphones in, go for a run, whatever it is that you do when you listen to this show, and let's take this interview away. Laura Briggs, here you go. Laura, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with our audience. So let's get this started with just a little bit of background about yourself. What is it that you do? And maybe tell us a little bit of how you got into that.
Sure. So I've always been interested in the law in some capacity. My first job was actually at age 16. I worked in the prosecutor's office creating pamphlets about date rape awareness and helping to process some files and administration, and thought I would go to law school in college, but then kind of shifted tracks. During that time, I worked for a family lawyer, I worked for an estate planning attorney, and I worked for a PI and workers' comp lawyer. So I was always involved in the law, but went a different route of going to graduate school, got a master's in political science, have done everything but my dissertation for my doctorate in public policy from Virginia Tech. And in the midst of my doctoral program, I was teaching 7th grade in Baltimore City, realized that wasn't a really good fit for me, and decided I wasn't going to work in traditional education at all. So I sort of left my previous dream of working as a professor to the side and launched a freelance writing business, mostly because I'd had a few professors in college and grad school who said, hey, I think you have some writing talent. And I thought, well, I've always been curious, could I make a go of it? And took it on as a way to make extra money. And it scaled and grew so quickly that I had to leave my day job a year later to be able to accommodate for the requests that I was getting. So mostly worked for attorneys, law firms, and digital marketing agencies who serve them, creating search engine optimized content for their website and blogs. Most of my clients are on retainer, so I'm blogging for them every month and publishing it on their behalf so that it looks like the firm is writing it, but I'm the one behind the scenes kind of doing the research, writing the content, and then publishing it for them based on best practices.
Wow, I love how you say that you were forced to leave your job, because people strive to get to the point where they can leave their job, and you just were kind of like, your arms were twisted and you had no choice. And so legal writing, SEO, you're behind the scenes writing. This might be blowing some people's minds, because there's so many people I run into who think that they are the ones who have to be the ones writing the blog post. And that's one of the big reasons why firm owners are apprehensive or not interested in getting into the marketing effort of writing content. So talk to us more about that. I think, is that called ghostwriting, or is that something else? And what does the process look like from the firm's perspective?
Sure. So it is called ghostwriting. That means that I sign plenty of non-disclosure agreements and I give up all rights to the content once the firm has paid for it. So it doesn't get published under my name. I don't use it as a writing sample. It essentially makes it look as if you're blogging once a week or even daily on behalf of the firm or as the individual attorney, even though it's being created by me. Now, you're right. Some firm owners think, well, I have to do this and I'm either not interested, I don't have time, or I don't want to learn the process for how to make that happen. And so they will instead choose to partner with a freelance writer. Now, one of the challenges that attorneys have when they go that route is not everyone understands the legal market. There's certain things you can and can't say as an attorney or a law firm. And there's also lots of people out there who are just not experienced in the law and don't understand that if you publish the wrong statute or something like that, you could have problems with the state bar. I've had clients who've had previous legal writers who didn't do their research well enough or just took images from Google and didn't realize that those weren't commercially licensed. And so hiring a legal writer, there's lots of hesitations around it. However, it's also kept me in business because I'm dependable and reliable. And so what happens is once a lot of my clients start working with me, they stick with me for the long haul. One of my clients has been with me for 6 years, and I've been blogging for him 3 times a week over the entire 6-year period. So a lot of attorneys, once they find someone who's a good partner as their ghostwriter, they're like, yep, hands off, you post it to my blog, you can share it on my social, you know what you're doing, we trust you to use best practices with SEO. So usually it starts with a client or a firm that says, we need content posted. Sometimes they know exactly what they want. They're like, here's the 50 topics we want covered over the next year. More often they're like, here's a few ideas I have, but can you come up with titles and topics and keywords and all of that? And that usually works just as well. I just have to know upfront which direction they want to go. Usually they want a little bit of kind of hand-holding in the beginning. They want to make sure I'm going to turn it on deadline. They want to make sure that the content is written properly. There's nothing in there that's an ethical flag or using words like specialist or expert, which you can't do. And then as soon as they feel confident, usually they're like, okay, like just send me the invoice, do what you do, and don't really worry about it. So it makes their lives a lot easier. For most attorneys, you're not making money from your blog or your website. Like your zone of genius is to be representing clients. So I try to help those clients contact you and get into your office so that you can spend your time doing what you do best, closing the client, taking the case, going to settlement negotiations, and, handling the full case.
Okay. So, you may have covered this. I'm be honest and upfront here with our audience. I actually had a brownout here while you were talking. So my camera blipped out and my microphone blipped out. Our connection stayed connected because all of my Wi-Fi stuff is on battery. But I missed part of what you were just saying. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you covered it already, I apologize.
That's okay.
Some of my clients have an issue with somebody else writing their content because they say that, you're giving a legal opinion and you can't have a non-attorney give legal opinion. It's going to be in my name. I want to make sure that, that I'm not saying something out there that's not really true. Are these posts staying away from a legal opinion? Are they not giving advice, or are you just making sure that after it's created, the attorney is really reading through it to make sure that there's nothing in there that's really not true?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think there's a distinction to be made between giving facts about something and then giving a legal opinion. So if I'm writing for a law firm that does class actions and I quote a study that's about how many, numerous cases have been filed under the Telephone Consumer Protections Act in the last 6 months, for example, that's just a statement of fact. And as long as we can link to that and back that up, usually if there's anything that even resembles an opinion in the article, it will be something like businesses that are using text messages or robocallers should be advised of the rising number of lawsuits that are targeting companies engaged in these practices, where it's not specifically giving a legal opinion, but it's more of like, if you have questions, you really should contact the lawyer. A lot of what is closed out in the call to action in these blogs and pieces is, if you think you might have a personal injury claim, if you're curious about your case, and always directing to the attorney directly, and not really, I don't do a lot of things where there's opinions on individual cases or something like that. Even when I write for criminal lawyers, I don't write about pending criminal cases, of course. I've had past clients working with other writers who said, yeah, this doctor got arrested and charged with XYZ, and we wrote a blog about it, and then his attorney came after us. So I think there's lots of great content out there where you don't even have to touch on those things at all. So giving legal advice is something that I steer away from doing anyways, and try to present an informational article. Most prospective clients who are going to read it are going to know that their case, one size doesn't fit all. So they know they will have to contact a lawyer, and it's usually designed to just give them some specific information. So for a PI lawyer, the blog might be, what is a catastrophic injury? And then you can talk about some of the things that are most frequently catastrophic injuries, and always direct them at the end. If you're not sure, if you have questions or a case, you need to set up a consultation with the attorney, so that we're writing content that's geared to what those prospective clients are most interested in anyways. 9 times out of 10, the client doesn't really care about the attorney's opinion on big issue cases anyways, or legal opinions on stuff that's currently happening. They just want to know, do you know this practice area well? Have you been working in it for a while? Do you get decent results for your clients? Do you give personalized attention if I do choose to hire you as my lawyer, sort of a thing?
Sure. And this is absolutely fascinating. Can you walk us through what happens behind the scenes? How does an article get created? How do you choose a title? How do you research the subject matter? And how much time goes into creating an article?
A lot more time goes into creating an article than you might expect, but it's also a lot less time than it might take someone who's new to the process. So I've been an SEO writer for the last 7 years. So over the course of that time, I've refined my processes and how I do research. I also use a lot of tools to track things that are going on in the industries or practice areas that my clients work in. So I work for an estate planning attorney. I have Google alerts set for estate planning study, long-term care study. So I'm getting notified right away if there's a new caring.com research project talking about how many people don't have wills. That's excellent fodder for the blog. It's timely. It's using a lot of those great keywords. So when I first start, though, I make a list, like a master list of keywords that they want to rank for or that they might want to consider ranking for. Sometimes the firm knows exactly what they're targeting. A lot of times they don't, and they'll leave that up to me, or they'll hire an SEO firm to come up with the list for me to handle. And then from there, I use a number of different keyword tools. I also check out their competitors too, to figure out what are their competitors ranking for. Is this something that you care about, and kind of build a strategy around that consistently targets the primary keyword, which is the most important one, and then secondary keywords. So variations of that original keyword or different ways to refer to it or related topics as well. And then we link. So when I create the piece, I'm doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, not just selecting the keyword, I'm writing it. I'm adding outbound links, which are those that go to other high quality websites that back up what we're saying. So that could be statutes, that could be a .gov government website. Also inbound links to other content on their site, meta descriptions. I'm uploading photos that have alt tags. That's very helpful for SEO purposes, and also with accessibility, people who have vision issues and maybe relying on something else to tell them what a picture is portraying. And then for most of my clients, they'll choose that I also post it for them. So they give me some type of access inside WordPress. I load the blog or piece of content in there, add the picture, make sure everything is good to go, and hit publish for them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Sounds like a lot. And no wonder attorneys themselves, when they try to do this themselves, struggle with it, because obviously there's so much more to it than just writing a blog post. All of the research that goes into just figuring out what the blog post should be about, and then the specific phrases and then all the stuff behind the scenes. It's absolutely fascinating. So if a firm needs to choose a marketing strategy, one of the big issues is they only have so much money to spend on marketing, and they have to figure out where to spend it. One of the examples I use a lot is there are firms that I come across where they spent $10,000 to create a really fancy firm video, but they don't have any traffic. They don't have anybody coming to their website. They don't have anybody watching the video. So what was the purpose of that $10,000 spend? Maybe the video is really high quality and really says a lot about the firm, but if nobody's watching it, it didn't get them anywhere. Now that's $10,000 they don't have to spend elsewhere. So in the big picture marketing scheme, where does blog writing and SEO content fit in? Also understanding that it takes a while for it to do its thing, right? You don't write a blog post and the next day it's ranking number one on Google for keywords, right? So where in the overall marketing strategy do you see this blog post writing and SEO content fitting in? And when does somebody know that they're ready for it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a core component of a marketing strategy for any firm that needs to generate leads online. If you have a solid referral system set up like in person, or you go to networking events or something like that, where you bring in a lot of your clients some other way, you might not feel like it's as important. And, if that strategy is working for you, I would even say like, don't invest a lot in content marketing, but your competitors probably are. So if someone else's phone is ringing off the hook because they have put in the time and energy to do content marketing, now not only are they taking a good chunk of the business, but they're so far ahead because they've probably been doing it for 6 months at least to get those kinds of results already. I also think too, like, you have to think about where your customers are going. In the past, they would have looked in the yellow pages, right? And then called the different firms that were listed there. Well, that's out the window, so where are they going now? They're on their phones. They're typing in Philadelphia criminal defense lawyer and seeing who pops up. And so your website doesn't only need to have content on it, it has to be properly search engine optimized. It has to be something that's mobile friendly, where a person on the go can be looking at this and kind of drawn in immediately. So one of the biggest mistakes I see firms make is they decide to get involved in content marketing, and then they post a blog once a month and go, well, this isn't working. And usually that blog post is not even related to anything that the potential client would care about. It's like, law firm celebrates 5th annual company picnic. It's like, none of your prospective clients are reading that, right? So you have to invest in it consistently to get results. The other thing I'll say is, in the past, law firms could get away with really short blog posts, like 300 to 400 words. A lot of that isn't relevant unless you're creating a frequently asked questions page. Google today rewards longer content, so 800 to 1200 words, where you can really go in depth on something. And it doesn't always have to directly relate to the legal process. It's helpful to be like, what is the process of settling with an insurance company? But what else are your clients thinking about? So what are my treatment options for a TBI? Like, if I've just been in a car accident and the doctor's diagnosed me with TBI, that's something I might be Googling anyways. And I might also have a need for a personal injury attorney. But throughout that long page of all the different treatment options for TBI, with all the good stuff like inbound and outbound links, I'm building trust with that law firm, because I'm like, wow, they really know what they're talking about. Like, they really understand how this has affected my life, how this could be a lifelong, course of treatment and rehabilitation. I can't go back to work. It all is contributing towards targeting that end reader, as well as sending a signal to the search engines like, oh, they just published a TBI blog. The same firm has posted things on car accidents and bike accidents and bus crashes. This is clearly a high quality resource hub about personal injury, and Google is much more likely to rank it. So I think it's important to at least consider it, especially for a mid-sized law firm. And it is absolutely critical if you are competing in a major market. If you are in a San Diego, a Houston, a Chicago, anything like that, that your competitors are very savvy or have outsourced some of their SEO, because they're showing up number 1 and number 2 in those search engine rankings.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are Googling to figure out what a TBI is, it's a traumatic brain injury. So you just opened up something that I wrote down here to ask you. So perfect timing for that. Specific markets, right? San Diego, New York, LA, whatever it is. A law firm can have a national footprint, but can also be very local. How does a local law firm work when it comes to SEO? If they're writing content that's supposed to rank, let's say we're talking about traumatic brain injury. So they write a whole article to rank for TBI. First of all, now you're competing with the medical space too. But let's just say that you manage to rank number 1. If they're a firm that's just in a really a singular geographic area, now they have traffic coming from all over the U.S. Aren't they going to be inundated by phone calls from people who are just not relevant leads for them? And asking the question the other way, how does a firm strategically write their SEO so that they can rank higher in their area and not worry about trying to beat out anybody else across the rest of the U.S.?
Yeah, so some firms prefer to have that national footprint because they have relationships with referral partners in other states. Most clients are savvy enough to land on a website and know that if it's clearly a New York law firm and they're located in Mississippi, that's not who they should call. And you're going to always want to have a geographic target for your entire page and also for the individual blogs as well. So sometimes the blogs might not have that much of a local focus. The TBI example is a good one. But if I'm talking about, Manhattan, I'm probably going to write a blog for that law firm of the top 5 most dangerous intersections for pedestrians in Manhattan. Why? Because I get to plug a lot of local things into a blog like that that's directly relevant to their target market. And it gets me that chance to talk about different neighborhoods in Manhattan, different streets where people have been involved in accidents, all of those things sending cues. So usually where a firm will start is with those geographic targets. They'll at least tell me like, these are, this is our core city is San Diego, but we get a lot of clients from Escondido. So make sure you use neighborhood terms and, city and county terms for these other related areas where our clients might come from. That's not something you want to do every single day because it comes across spammy if it's like Brooklyn personal injury lawyer and then the next day it's Manhattan personal injury lawyer. But it's good to mix those in with your more general topics and then close those general topics out with a call to action of, if you've been hurt in any of the boroughs of New York, including Brooklyn, so on and so forth, contact a New York personal injury lawyer today. So it is much easier to compete in a local sense. You also want to make it clear who you do and don't represent. So a lot of attorneys will literally list it out. We help clients in blah, 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 blah. They'll list every county and city where they take clients from. So it's very clear about whether or not they're the right fit, but much, much easier to rank on a local basis than national for sure.
Okay. And what kind of budget should a firm expect to pay for this kind of service where the content, the titles, everything is being done for them? So basically just write a check and it happens, right? Mm-hmm. For that level of service when it comes to covering blog post writing and SEO, what is the budget that should cost them?
Oh my goodness, that's a hard question to answer because even within individual practice areas, there's variations on length and there's how technical is the topic. Writing for a corporate lawyer takes me a lot more time than writing for a PI lawyer, for example. So it really depends. I mean, you'll find beginning writers that will maybe do about $50 for a page of content, which is around 500 words. More experienced writers will charge more. Some attorneys that may be listening may have been like, oh, well, I hired someone for 20 or 25 bucks. A lot of those clients eventually end up hiring someone like me because a lot of what was created for 20 or 25 bucks is duplicate content, which can actually really hurt your website's search engine ranking, or it's written so poorly or inaccurately that the firm can't use it at all. I actually had one client in Pennsylvania where he'd hired another lawyer or another writer super cheap, and 40% of his website was stolen content from other lawyers. So he was actually blacklisted from Google, and it took us several months to get him off of the Google blacklist because from their perception, he was just stealing other attorneys' content. He didn't know that it was stolen. So in the terms of legal writing or anything that's medical or financial related, you get what you pay for. So it will kind of be across the board. And I also base my rates too on like how long is the firm willing to work with me? What is the volume of content? So usually I'll apply discounts for VIP clients who are signing for 3 or 6 months at a time. Sometimes a firm will come to me and say, look, I just need 5 pages on my website. I don't have ongoing needs. And I'll price that a little bit differently too. So the answer is it depends, but that's usually a good starting point for a quality legal writer. I don't think they're going to do it for any less than $50 per page.
Okay. And somebody like you, I can't imagine that you're doing it for $50 per page. What is the upper end if they're getting somebody who's an expert, who's producing really top-notch stuff for them? And I understand that there's all kinds of variations, but yeah, what is the ballpark that they should envision when they're picking up the phone or sending an email to somebody and reaching out and saying, hey, I heard about you from wherever, and I'm interested in having you, write for me. What should they expect?
Especially for longer content, so more like 1,000 words or about 2 pages of content, most experienced writers are going to be in probably the $300 to $500 range, which I understand for especially a small firm is usually out of their budget, it is an investment in your marketing efforts. But as I explained earlier, there's so many steps that go into it and a lot of research that gets done. And a good legal writer is also going to take into consideration what is going to help this firm the most. A good legal writer is also not going to take on your competitors. So let's say they land that New York PI lawyer. They're not going to take your competing firm down the street in New York City. So there's also that to take into consideration as well. But a lot of work goes into it, as you can imagine, to create something that doesn't throw up any red flags with the state bar as far as ethics or use of words or claims that cannot be made by attorneys, and doing the proper research to make sure that it reads accurately.
Okay, and how long do you think that it takes from when they engage an expert in creating blog content for them and they start producing that blog content before they start to see the phone ringing in the firm? And I know you can't answer this, emphatically with a straight answer, but there's got to be a window of time that the phone's not going to ring, and then there's a period of time where at some point the phone will start to ring because articles are starting to rank close to the top and people are starting to get it. The web traffic is picking up. At that point, it's a financial game. It's a number game. What is the total number of people landing on the site, and what some percentage of that should be turning into phone calls inbound into the firm. So really what I want to know is set the stage for somebody who's thinking about doing this to really understand what kind of upfront investment they have. So now we know it could be anywhere from $50, $100 to $500 a month to start producing one post a month. But if you're producing one post a month, when do you start to see leads come in from that?
Well, it depends on there's a lot of factors that go into it because the content itself is only one. So if I write great content every day for you for a month, but your website is terrible and it's bright yellow and no one can read it, or it loads slowly, none of that matters, right? Also, if you're only posting once a month, it's going to take a lot longer. So a firm that's posting consistently, maybe 2 to 3 times per week, several months, assuming everything else is in order, assuming their website works really well, assuming they take any other recommendations that I might make. Sometimes, for example, I'll tell a certain firm, like especially if it's estate planning, you should have a freebie, you should have a lead magnet that's getting people on your email list, because the odds of them visiting your blog once and becoming a customer are low. But if they visit once, we get their email address in exchange for this great free lead magnet that's like, 5 steps to Medicaid planning or whatever. And then over the course of weeks, you're sending them valuable content from your blog and from your firm in a newsletter, we have a much better chance of converting them. So it really depends on how much the attorney is willing to put into it. But and especially to like, what is it worth to you? So for a personal injury lawyer, paying $500 a post, if that's bringing them a $200,000 case or $1 million case, is such a small drop in the bucket compared to where they're collecting on the final end of that project and settlement, right? So it really depends on what it's worth to you. Someone who has smaller per case averages might only want to blog a handful of months and know that they're not going to get the greatest results at the front, but they're trying to make that effort into ongoing search engine marketing, and being consistent is key with Google. So whatever you decide, be consistent with it. Don't say you're going to write 5 blog posts a week and then keep up with it for a week and then let your blog go dormant for 6 months. That's another issue too, is like, how long has there been no blog or a terrible blog that we have to like rebuild from? So it's really hard to say. And there's so many pieces of the process too that maybe outside of the writer's control. Like if they don't hire the writer to post it, I have a freelance writing coaching client, a freelancer that I'm coaching right now, and she's written 40 blogs for her client over the last year, and they've posted 19. So she keeps telling them, please post, like you have to keep posting or this won't be consistent. So that factors into it as well. Like, are they following through with the whole posting process?
And how do you sit in this process? In other words, are you identifying to the client, look, your website is crap and you need to redo it, and here's a company I work hand in hand with that I recommend you work with to do that, because we could do all the writing that we want, but until this gets fixed, it's not, we're only going to get to a certain level without changing it. And then on the back end, I know you said that you get access to their WordPress so you could post it for them. But beyond that, like you mentioned a lead magnet, a freebie, do you get involved in creating that for them, or at least guiding them in that process, or are they on their own and they kind of need to figure these things out for themselves?
No, especially if it's a retainer client, so somebody I'm working with ongoing, and I make a recommendation and they want to take it, I'm usually going to help them throughout that whole process. So let's say it's that lead magnet and they're like, we don't know how to do that, we're stuck. I'll be like, well, why don't I send you 5 ideas of what I think would be a great title for a lead magnet for your target audience. You pick one, we'll go from there. I have a graphic designer that I work with, so she can design it if you want. You'd need to send me your firm logos and colors and all of that. Or if you have someone else you prefer to work with, sometimes firms do have an in-house or a trusted partner for website design, for example. They'll put me on the phone with the designer and I'll be like, listen, this drop-down menu doesn't work, or these 6 pages belong on the resource page and they're not showing up there right now, or whatever that I might think is wrong with the site, and an opportunity to improve it. So usually I will try to help clients. I don't do web development or web design myself, so we'd have to find somebody else. But there are definitely recommendations that I make, like, hey, do you have a designer? Because I'd love to talk to them. There's some tweaks we can make here for things to work a little bit more effectively.
Okay. This is all fascinating, and one of the things that you mentioned in my head, I even said it out loud. I was thinking that they're posting once a month, and then you threw out something like 2 to 3 times a week. What is a cadence that is required for Google to look and say this is really relevant and really push somebody up in the rankings? What should the expectation be as far as how frequently they're submitting a post?
A minimum of once per week is what I would recommend, especially if you're in a competitive market. Competitive markets will be posting more than that because they have stiff competition and they're trying to kind of beat out those other law firms. If it's shorter content, you need to be publishing more regularly. So if it's less than 800 words, it probably needs to be a couple of times per week, ideally. If it's longer, you can get away with once every week as long as it's really well written and has more than one, it has a focus keyword, but it also has secondary keywords in there. I think that's sort of the general guideline for companies that are just getting started. And usually I've worked with firms before that are posting 4 and 5 times per week. That's usually the shorter content, and it's usually because they already have invested in the content marketing strategy before, or they're really ready to go at it full steam ahead and want to kind of build their success that much more quickly. So definitely no less than once a week to really, and even that is going to take a while because it can take Google up to 2 months to do what they call indexing, which means like crawling your website, getting those signals from your links, from your keywords, et cetera, and kind of like refactoring in how that individual page might rank for certain keywords. So that's why it really is a long game with content marketing. But if you invest in it and you stop, you will see a significant decline. I've seen that with a client of mine that chose to hire someone in-house who published once over the course of 4 months, and they lost over 5,000 hits like per week that they were getting on their website when they just kind of had this great strategy over 4 years and then it collapsed into nothing. And that really did have direct impacts for them.
Wow. So this is certainly not for the faint of heart because you're basically committing to something that's as regular as the rent that you pay for your office. You really need to have an ongoing strategy at least one time a week, something that's going to cost anywhere from $100 to $500 a post. So you are looking at a $500 to $2,000 a month expense that you need to commit to and stick with. And for me, I'm a financial guy. We need to have somewhere where we can measure whether there's an ROI on that. Now, obviously, if your average case is 4,000, 6,000, 10,000, it doesn't take much traction. And, all you need is 1 or 2 clients a month to close, and it probably makes sense financially to keep it going. So it's really just being able to stick with it on the front end. You really need to do is look at your cash position, look at your finances in your firm and say, okay, can I carry this for a certain amount of time? And Laura, I'm just going to ask you. I know you already answered this in a different way, but what is that cushion that we should be telling people who are listening to this to make sure that they have, so that they can keep this going long enough? Or is 6 months adequate before they should hopefully start to see some business coming out of this? That, so let's say it's $1,000 a month it's going to cost them. So then 6 months is $6,000. That, make sure you have $6,000 in the bank to run this through for 6 months before you start to see anything from it. But then it should kind of start paying for itself.
Yes, so long as you're not in a super competitive market, a major city where you've got 20 to 50 other firms you're competing against, and all other things being considered, like the quality of your overall website. Usually I won't blog for a company or a firm until I feel that their website is structured the way it should be too. Those more static pages that we're not going to update, but your practice area pages, for example, to make sure if you're an estate planning attorney, do we have a good page on estate planning, business succession, asset protection? That's really going to be the base, and we're going to be linking back to those a lot in the blog. So that's usually a way for firms to kind of get a taste of it. That's a really good way to do a trial project with a freelance writer too. Do I like this person? Did they contribute content that will be living on my webpage for a long time? That's very helpful. Do I want to partner with them for a blog? So it will definitely take several months, and of course will depend on the length of what you're posting, and the regularity of your posting and the market that you're in. But for sure, like there are some clients who are bringing in, and they're doing a will for $300. They're, maybe a brand new attorney, and that's most of their clients is a $300 average. Unless you're doing 10 of those meetings per week, this might not be the strategy for you because it might not pay off enough in what you do. That's why a lot of the attorneys that I work with are doing more complicated cases. They're doing like racketeering or white collar crime if they're criminal attorneys, they're personal injury or medical malpractice lawyers, because those cases tend to be of substantial size.
Yeah. It's interesting because you keep going back to it. It depends. If you're in a geographic area where there's a lot of competition, then it could take longer. But I can tell you from my own working with clients, I mean, you're giving a lot of firms credit where credit is not deserved. Competition may be stiff, but there's not a lot of them doing blogging correctly and in a good way. So that's, in a way, this is kind of like a frontier that is untapped and really open for anybody, because if you do Google searches, look at what comes up. I mean, even if I'm sitting here in Rockland County, if I go into my web browser and I just do a quick search for estate planning, number one and number two are going to be NOLO and some of those websites that are purely informational, not representing a firm at all. But then like the number three thing is some firm out in Missouri. Like it's not, nobody in New York is ranking there, and I'm in New York, so it's a competitive market. It's a very fragmented and open practice area, and people are not showing up. So the opportunity is amazing, and I really like the idea of having somebody doing it right for you, because so many people try to just do it and write their own stuff and really don't understand the marketing side of it. And that's really the key. You're not just writing content for the sake of putting content out there. Just to check off a list that I put content out there. It's really got to be high quality stuff, which leads me to my next question, Laura. I heard from the various marketing podcasts that I listen to and the books that I read that the algorithm is moving more and more to content that has multimedia on the page. So, and you mentioned graphics with alternative text, but what about video and infographics and things like that? Maybe PowerPoints, on the page. Do you get involved in that? And how much do you think that affects the rankings of a page if they start to incorporate things like that?
I think at this point in time, it's helpful for your readers. It is not as helpful to Google. I think that may change in the next 10 years, but Google is still primarily a text-based algorithm. So for example, like when I do my podcast episodes, we still do really long text-based show notes because Google doesn't have a really great way to listen to the audio on my page if I just put the audio box there and figure out what I'm talking about. So we still have to balance that demand demand for text to send the cues to Google. I think it also helps people who do have disabilities, who, if you're posting a podcast and they're deaf or they're hard of hearing, we want to provide an alternative for them. I think that it's good to have things like infographics and PowerPoints and other multimedia, but it should never just be like, here's my PowerPoint and I'm dropping it on the page and hoping that it will ever get visited. If you don't have a way to market to it or text that's also sending the cues to search engines as well, it's probably not going to be as effective. But that material can be great fodder for your newsletter. So maybe you send out a weekly newsletter of, here's the blog we posted this week, and here's an infographic we created about XYZ in our practice area. You're definitely appealing to people who maybe don't want to read and just want to do a quick scan or are curious about something. I have a client that does 3 blogs per month and 1 infographic to kind of like keep that balance going of posting something every single week. And all together, that kind of works. You don't want to become too reliant on one or the other. So I think it's good to mix it up. But even with video, like you talked about, the firm that invests in the $10,000 video or just throws the video up on YouTube, if you don't have a marketing strategy to help that rank, it's just another piece of collateral that you invested in. So even with content marketing, sit down at the beginning of any potential, engagement, whether it's you're going to do it in-house or you're going to hire a writer to do it as a freelancer for you. What is my intended goal for this? What are we going to do to make sure this is effective as possible? If my website sucks and I'm going to drop $5,000 on content marketing, maybe I shouldn't do that until we figured out how we can fix the website and make it more effective. What is the goal for this video that we're producing? Do we have an outlet to distribute it to where we have a lot of fans or followers already? Or what, text can we get a transcript of the video and also turn this into a lead magnet where the person can watch the video or read the text if they want? I'm a big fan of repurposing content whenever you can. I just think that right now, I'm sure Google's going to work on this in the coming years, but they're still primarily text-based. So I would not rely on anything that is only image-based. Make sure that it has a text counterpart for now as well.
Absolutely. This is very informative. Well, when we look at this in an insulary, siloed vision, and we say, okay, should I do this? And we forget that there's all these other pieces that all play together. For example, when you post a blog post, what are you doing to put the blog post out there? Mm-hmm. Are you sending an email to the people who are on your email list? Do you even have an email list? Are you putting it out on social media? Do you have a Facebook page for your firm? Do you have, a LinkedIn page for your firm? Is there a place that you're going out there and sharing this out where it's going to get eyeballs in some other way? And I'm guessing, Laura, that you don't believe that the only purpose of this blog post is to show up in Google searches and rank in Google, right? So, yeah. Once again, how does somebody coordinate all these different things, and what are some of your clients doing to facilitate not missing these opportunities?
Well, most of them decide to outsource it to somebody else because they're like, wow, this is a lot and my firm is already stretched pretty thin and this is not my area of expertise. I have 5 client meetings today. So a lot of them will just decide, who can I partner with, whether that's an SEO firm, a marketing firm, a freelance writer, and a freelance graphic designer that maybe work together to create things. And you're right. It is not just about Google. Actually, I believe that what's more important than Google is the end reader and being able to connect with them. This is another challenge for attorneys. Many of them are masterful at writing. They're outstanding at writing briefs, at writing communication for their clients and to their clients. They're not great at search engine optimization writing. So if they've taken advantage of a blog, it usually reads like it was written by an attorney, which when someone lands on your page, it can actually feel condescending because they're like, what statute? Like, what is this terminology? Like, I don't know. Do you represent people who've been hurt in a car accident? Because that's what happened to me today. So we have to think very carefully about the end reader. We don't want to talk down to them by being like, per the statutes established in 1871. They don't care about that, right? They care about like, how is my life going to be changed by being in this accident? Or why do I need a will? Or how serious is it that the FBI is investigating me for racketeering, right? Like, that's what they care about. So I write to them first, and then do the search engine optimization second, so that everything you create should be accomplishing those dual purposes. Because you can have the greatest piece of content in the world that's like 5,000 pages long, But if someone lands on your website, gets overwhelmed, or feels like you're talking down to them, they're leaving in 2 seconds. So we have to like get their attention and keep them there, and also highlight whatever your firm's unique value proposition is. So that might be that you give every client individual service. You have all the resources of a big firm, but you give each client personalized service. That's got to come through in your blogs as well. Like if you're feeling totally overwhelmed and like there's too many things to keep track of, don't worry, we handle every legal aspect of your case for you so that you can focus on healing and getting better. That speaks directly to the psychological point that your prospective client is at. So think about, why did they just Google what they Googled to land on your website? If it's a criminal defense attorney, they're scared, they're worried, they're asking questions about jail time. Should I answer calls from investigators? If it's a personal injury lawyer, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't go back to work. How am I going to pay my bills? What do I take the insurance company's calls? What if they're delaying my claim? So we got to think like that end reader, that prospective client, all the time. That's what I do. It's like, why would somebody Google this? What emotional position are they in to be looking for an attorney? And how can I take this firm's unique spin on things and combine it with SEO and combine it with what the laws of the state are, so that we're kind of addressing all those issues in every single piece?
So there's so many different pieces that we're talking about, and obviously you're the professional on SEO and SEO writing, right? Whereas there's another, marketing professional that their, strong point ninja thing is social media marketing. Another one might be, advertising with Google AdWords. Another one might be Facebook ads. A firm can go out and align themselves with a number of different vendors to get all of these different pieces. And then there are people who say, we're a marketing agency. We do it all in-house. We'll do your SEO writing for you. We'll do your ads. We'll do your social media posts. Is it possible for an agency to do it all and be really good at all the pieces? Or does a firm really need to plan on having all of these different relationships? And do they, how do they go about? Really, it sounds like a lot of work to figure out the best person or the best agency to work with for each of these pieces. Have you been exposed to that part of the process, and do you have any idea how that's being navigated, maybe with your existing clients?
Yes. So I think there are some good agencies that are out there. I think it's a really hit or miss experience for attorneys, though, because usually the agency will have expertise in a handful of things, but not all things, or they're using the same approach for every single client. And maybe that isn't being updated as much as it should be. I've written for agencies before, so sometimes they have guidelines that I think are a little bit outdated or maybe are a little bit too generic. There's no opportunity to put anything specific in there about the client. It's just like, write a page on, bike accidents in this area. And it's like, okay, but every bike accident lawyer in this region also has that. So how is this different, for this specific firm? So it depends on the level of personalization you want. What I've seen a lot of firms do that are really invested in this is they work with an agency for SEO purposes, like backlinks, defining keywords, running scans of the entire website to figure out what pages are problematic, what 404 errors do you have, et cetera. And then they might go with an agency, or they might work with like a writer. A lot of my clients don't want to work specifically with an agency. Many of them have been burned and just feel like they're being charged a lot of money and they don't really see it coming back to them. So sometimes you can do the hybrid thing, like hiring a freelance writer and saying, can you also post this to my social? Can you also make recommendations for my site? I think at a minimum, you should have somebody who is familiar with the core like technical aspects of SEO. So beyond just the content, but your overall website, maybe a graphic designer that you don't even need to have on retainer, but someone trusted that you can go to and say, this page needs updated or whatever on an as needed basis. And then a writer, or you can choose to work with an agency. But because agencies offer so many services, sometimes that's really expensive for a firm to have all these different, sort of productions going at the same time. But it can also work really well for some firms. So it's a matter of personal preference as well. I think a lot of the attorneys who choose to work with me, they want to know the actual person who's creating the content, right? Like they want to know that I'm competent rather than the agency saying, oh, we work with 50 freelance writers. Well, does that mean that my blog is going to vary in quality and consistency? So again, that's a personal preference.
Okay. Now, earlier you mentioned that if their site is not good, then the first thing they should do is fix their site, overhaul their site before they even think about implementing a blog strategy.
Yes.
And you had mentioned that there's specific pages, especially the practice area pages, should be very clear and specific to what they offer and so on. Do you get involved in writing those? It's not necessarily a blog post, but as a writer, if somebody was to be at that step where they say, okay, I want to work with you, and now they have to overhaul their website, would you help with writing those pages? Because I know, and I'm go off on a tangent here for a second, but for me, I started and stopped the process of creating a really good website for my business. And really the thing holding me back is each time the web developer is like, okay, I want you to write this page, and I struggle with writing. So it just becomes something that I don't do. I don't get around to, and it just gets pushed off. So that's really, my own personal experience tells me that maybe there's other people out there that struggle with that as well. So is that something that you get involved with?
I do, especially if I'm going to be partnering with this firm over the long run, because it's going to help my blogs perform even better. So if it is something that is going to help the overall content marketing strategy, like the lead magnet or like those practice area pages, I'm at least going to recommend it to the client, because if I'm writing blogs about a living trust, and we also have a standing practice area page about living trust, of course I'm going to link between that blog and consistently help that original practice area page to rank more effectively for that core keyword too. So because the two feed back and forth on each other, that's definitely something I try to help firms with. Another place where they get confused is like, well, what pages exactly do I need to have? So that's something where I'll do sort of an audit, and I'll go look at their competitors, and then just based on my overall knowledge of their specific practice areas, I'll say, these are the 10 pages I think you need to add for your, overall website as like a resource that's going to live and stay the same on this page based on what you hope to rank for, what your competitors are doing, and what we're going to be blogging about. And sometimes clients will also give me really specific things. They'll be like, yeah, we've done a lot of defective product lawsuits. We don't want to anymore. So now we're moving more into the realm of, defective drugs. So don't talk about consumer products. So that's when we craft a strategy too. All right, if you're already ranking for the products, how can we go back and fix the product pages to also put in a plug about defective drugs and build a new strategy around ranking for defective drugs as well. So even when things are shifting, you can still capitalize on some of the traction you've already got.
Okay. And my last question, I promise, is my last one. We're going to wrap up. My last question is how does a law firm owner go and find themselves a freelance writer and determine their skill, how skilled they are and how good they're going to be? Where do you suggest that they go to look, and what is the criteria or some of the things that they should be asking to be able to determine whether they're a good fit or not?
If you know any of your colleagues from law school, maybe in different states or different practice areas, that you can ask for a referral if they're using a ghostwriter, that's a good place to start. Some firms are really cagey about owning up to the fact that they're using a ghostwriter. So they won't necessarily tell you, but maybe if you comment on their content, you're like, wow, you guys post 2 blogs every week. How are you keeping up with that? They might tell you and have a referral. I get a lot of my clients finding me on LinkedIn, or honestly, it speaks to what I do, but they find me through Google search. So I have a website that's tailored for the search terms that lawyers would look for. And I get a lot of requests through my own website asking questions about writing legal content. So LinkedIn is a great place to look because you're going to find more professional people there. I would steer away from places like Fiverr or other job board sites. They might work for other types of content. Legal is very specific, and so many attorneys have been burned by hiring the wrong writers. And then when you first hire someone, always do a test project, 1 page, 3 pages, 5 pages, something that has a clear beginning and end time where you can establish communication with this person. You can establish guidelines of what you do and don't want. You can see how they work. And then if it's a total disaster, you've only committed to this one small piece and you can move on about your business and test somebody else. If it's a really good person and they have an opening on their calendar to take you, that's when you say like, hey, I loved these 5 pages. Like I'm ready ready to do like 10 more to put you on retainer for blogs, but do a test project. You'd be amazed. I often joke with some other freelancers, like half the reason I'm in business is because other writers cannot meet deadlines. The number of my clients who come to me and are like, yeah, I hired someone and then they ghosted me. Like I never heard from them again. They never even submitted the work to get paid. It's like, so you got to look for that too. Are they professional? Have they done this a lot? Do they have some interest or background in the law? They don't need to be a JD, but likewise, we may not want somebody who's 19 years old and this is their first freelance writing project because they won't really understand the nuances of legal. So you're kind of balancing that as well.
Okay, very interesting. Laura, this has all been very insightful. And, as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, we really need to get a blog going. And it's almost, I feel like the listeners are probably sitting on the other end thinking that this is something they need to do right away. If they're in that position and they're interested in working with you, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so check out my website. It's legalseowriter.com. Pretty simple. I'm also on LinkedIn as Laura Briggs, so you can take a look at my profile there and connect with me, ask questions, or even if you're like, I don't know if content marketing is right for me, can we have a chat about that type of thing? I'm always happy to help attorneys.
Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us, and it's been a pleasure having you. And I think that this was absolutely wonderful, and everybody's going to really enjoy the information that we just put out there. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.